Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espy.
Well, Fastamai, good evening. Welcome to Update, your half-hour rundown of what's been happening on the Isle of Man. And in the past few minutes, we've just found out who's standing for a seat on Legco when that election happens at the start of March. 16 candidates. I'll let you know who they are in a few minutes. Also tonight, should all taxis on the Isle of Man be electric? Now, this is a question that really has got you talking on our social media pages today. We'll find out more a little bit later. And it's not a U-turn, says the Treasury Minister, as he defends the decision to pause introducing the Manx pension guarantee. All that plus the weather, the traffic and travel. And if you'd like to get in touch, 166 177 or studio@manxradio.com. Let's start with the news headlines with Christian Fastamai.
The Treasury Minister says a decision to pause the introduction of the Manx pension guarantee is not a U-turn after reverting the changes back to sit in line with the UK triple lock.
I've been contacted by a lot of constituents who aren't quite sure which pension they're on, aren't quite sure whether they'd be affected by change. For a lot of people, they feel it's just a little bit too soon.
Treasury will instead propose a 4.1% increase to both the basic retirement pension and the Manx state pension. 16 candidates have been nominated for a seat on the Legislative Council in the upcoming elections. Among them are 3 current MLCs seeking to retain their positions in Tynwald. The Isle of Man's natural environment is likely to suffer considerable damage from the inevitable loss of around 90% of diseased trees.
The Isle of Man Climate Change Plan declared a real push for tree planting, but I'm not sure that push is happening.
Ben Brooker is a tree expert who's pushing for an intense planting programme across the island. 2 weather warnings are set to come into force this evening. Freezing temperatures and strong winds are expected to cause ice and some coastal overtopping. And the dates for this year's Royal Manx Agricultural Show have been announced. It'll take place on the 8th and 9th at Knockelu Farm in Patrick. In the latest international news now, and the head of NATO says Ukraine will be involved in peace talks in any way whatsoever, following concerns the US and Russia could freeze Kyiv out. However, the US president rang Volodymyr Zelensky, who says Ukraine must be at the negotiating table.
Today, the main thing is that everything does not go according to Putin's plan. Any bilateral negotiations about Ukraine, not on other topics, but any bilateral talks about Ukraine without us, we will not accept.
And noisy tractors drowned out the UK Prime Minister, who'd been hoping to discuss new housing projects earlier. Farmers are angry about the upcoming changes to inheritance tax. Those are the Update News headlines next at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Christian. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Those 2 yellow weather warnings, as mentioned. Ice, that's a low risk for ice, but that is from midnight tonight until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Again, the usual places, it's those areas that are above 500 feet. And there's also one for coastal overtopping. That comes into force from 11 tonight until 2:30 tomorrow. That's because of the strong southeast wind, so there will be overtopping on exposed coastal roads and promenades for a couple of hours. That's around the time of the next 2 high tides. That's 24 minutes past midnight and 12:31 tomorrow afternoon. So the general forecast, dry this evening and tonight, maybe a few clear intervals, minimum temperatures 3 or 4 in most places, but as we know, 0 on the hills. And then tomorrow, another mostly cloudy and cold day. It will be dry until some patchy light rain arrives late afternoon or evening. A fresh to strong southeast wind that will ease a little bit later, and the maximum temperature 6 Celsius. Sunset this evening was at 5:23. Sunrise tomorrow morning, it's getting earlier, 7:41.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Firestone Rubber Roof Shop for one-piece flat roofing systems. No joins, no leaks. We also line commercial box gutters in one piece up to 60 metres with a 20-year written warranty against leakage. Call Rubber Roof Shop on 49667.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Beldorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company. Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
Celebrate the Snug being 15 this year and save hundreds of pounds with 15% off the supply and installation of solid fuel stoves. Sale ends 28th of February. Visit the Snug's Ramsey showroom 6 days a week or call 818187.
Many people are struggling. You can help by volunteering or making a donation to Isle of Man Food Bank, whether it be food or essential items or financial support. Please call 646 999, brought to you by Descon Office Interiors.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio. It's just gone 5:05. Now, a Douglas man has described how he panicked when an Onken resident climbed onto his car bonnet, telling a jury he believed he was going to be harmed. Jackson Joseph Paul is standing trial at Douglas Courthouse this week, accused of causing the death of Jordan Thomas by dangerous driving. News editor Tessa Hawley has been in court today. She joins us now in the studio, and it's been another busy day in court. I should say at this point, Tessa, we don't expect this report to contain any graphic information, but people still may find it upsetting. Was this the first time the jury had actually heard from the defendant?
In person it was, yes. So this afternoon the prosecution closed its case against Mr. Paul and the defence opened their case. That meant it was the 35-year-old's turn to take to the witness box and give evidence about what he says happened on the 25th of February last year on Harbour Road in Onken. And he told jurors that he'd been at home with his flatmate Niall Jones watching TV when Mr. Jones persuaded him to go out for a drive and get a coffee from McDonald's. As the men were driving back, Mr. Paul described turning onto Harbour Road, where he became aware of a man standing in the road between parked cars.
And we know now that the man stood in the road was 29-year-old Jordan Thomas. So what did Mr. Paul say happened next?
So he told the jury that he stopped his vehicle and gestured to Mr. Thomas, who he didn't know, to cross in front of him. But he added he just stood there staring. He was unsteady on his feet. As Mr. Paul went to drive past, he claimed Mr. Thomas threw himself onto his car bonnet and began grabbing his windscreen wipers and punching the windscreen, describing his behaviour as aggressive. I thought he wanted to fight me, he told the court. I didn't want to get out. He was a big guy. He definitely would have knocked me out.
Now, I understand two videos which were recorded by Mr. Jones were played in court again today. They were played yesterday as well. What did Mr. Paul say about those?
So they were played again, and in the first one, whilst Mr. Thomas is on the bonnet of the BMW, Mr. Jones can be heard laughing. Now, Mr. Paul's advocate asked his client, how did you feel in that situation? Did you think it was a laughing matter? Not at all, not one bit, the defendant responded. There was nothing funny about the situation. Mr. Paul said he feared Mr. Thomas was going to break through the windscreen, adding, I panicked. I completely panicked. I thought if he's going to get in, he's going to get me.
Well, we know that after reversing, Mr. Paul then ended up accelerating forwards before Mr. Thomas fell from the bonnet of his vehicle. What did he say about that?
Mr. Paul said he believed he was still in reverse, but as the car started moving forwards when he touched the accelerator, he told the court, in that panic, my foot froze. He said the whole incident had been traumatic, adding, I think about it all the time. I should have just got out and let him beat me up. He also denied allegations put to him by the prosecution that he deliberately accelerated at speed, knowing Mr. Thomas was on the bonnet. It was a mistake, Mr. Paul told the court. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional.
And what about Mr. Jones? Did the jury hear from him?
In a way, yes. So Deemster Graham Cook told the jury today that Mr. Jones was not available to give evidence to the court and they should not speculate as to why, adding he simply is not here. Instead, the jurors were read the statement which the front seat passenger had provided to police last year. And in it, Mr. Jones described the incident with Mr. Thomas as very surreal, adding he looked intense and threatening. He looked like he wanted to attack someone. 1 minute we were driving, the next a man was on Jackson's car. He described Mr. Thomas's behaviour as escalating, adding his facial expressions changed. I would say he had a look of rage, adding he didn't seem to have any concern for his own safety.
Tessa, thank you very much indeed. Jackson Paul denies causing death by dangerous driving. That trial will continue tomorrow at Douglas Courthouse. You can find out more on this story at manxradio.com. Well, it's coming up to 5:10, and I mentioned that in the past 20 minutes or so, we found out who is standing for a seat on the Legislative Council. This election going to take place on Tuesday, the 4th of March. So there are 16 candidates. 3 of them are people who've already had seats and are just coming to the end of their term in Legco. Let me run you through all of the people that we know who are standing. We've got Julia Bell, who's been proposed by Rob Callister. We've got Rob Mercer, who is one of the sitting candidates proposed by Kate Lord-Brennan. Bill Henderson, another sitting candidate proposed by David Ashford. Mark Cleater has been proposed by Stu Peters. Claire Louise Newell has been proposed by Alex Allenson. Kerry Sharp, the other remaining sitting member, has been proposed by Rob Callister. Kirsty Morford has been proposed by Rob Callister as well. Martin Perkins, a former MHK, is standing. He's been proposed by Claire Barber. Gary Cluett, he is somebody I understand who stood for election, I think, in 2021. He's been proposed by David Ashford. Andrew Jones has been proposed by John Wannenberg. Peter Reid has been proposed by John Wannenberg as well. Barry Duncan has been proposed by Tim Glover. Ron Berry has been proposed by Claire Christian. Matthew Goff, also proposed by Claire Barber. Brian Holt by Claire Christian. And Barry Carbis has been proposed by Anne Corlett. So that is 16 people standing for those 4 seats that are available. You'll be able to find out much more on this at manxradio.com very shortly. 11 minutes past 5 now. Should all taxis on the Isle of Man be electric? Well, it's a question government is asking as it launches a survey of taxi drivers to see if it would be feasible. The Climate Transformation team wants to gather information about the feasibility of electrifying the island's fleet. Mike Birchall is secretary of the Isle of Man Unite Taxi branch and also from the Manx Taxi Federation. He doesn't think there's any chance of this idea sticking.
The technical position that we're in at the moment, they're not feasible to switch the whole trade to electric. If you look now, the mileage capabilities of the electric cars is increasing, I know that. But even a one-man car on the island can be doing up to 300 miles a day in busy periods. And the mileage figures that are given for electric cars, they rarely do the mileage per charge that they're saying, especially in conditions on the Isle of Man. If you've got hills, they use more battery. If you're sitting on the taxi rank in Douglas in the middle of winter, you want your heater on, it uses battery. Put your fog lights on, it uses battery. So if the car is stated at doing maybe 300 and something miles per charge, it's rarely going to reach that. Number 2, there's been a lot of issues on the island over the last 12 months with insurance for electric vehicles. One insurer put their premiums up by about 300%, so that's another issue. I believe that there is no body repair shop currently on the island that can fix EVs, so I believe they have to be taken off island. And it's the cost of purchasing an electric vehicle as well. I mean, personally, I run my business and I buy vehicles that are maybe between 2 and 5 years old when I replace a vehicle. I wouldn't be wanting to buy an electric vehicle that had a 2-year or 5-year-old batteries in it, just in case the batteries go, because that's the main part of the vehicle. And if the batteries do go, you can't afford to replace them. In the next 10 years, I would say pretty much zero would be the chance of electrifying the whole taxi fleet on the Isle of Man.
That is Mike Birchall, the secretary of the Isle of Man Unite Taxi branch. Well, Liam Joyce is the director of an all-electric taxi company on the island. He thinks it'd be great to see all taxis become electric vehicles.
We have 5 vehicles in the fleet and they are all fully electric.
What has the transition been like to using electric ones?
The transition's been quite good as electric cars have got better in terms of range and also price. It's really pushed us to use them.
Do you find that you're saving money by using electric vehicles? Have you seen costs go down?
Yeah, so in about a month, the cost saving would be around about £500 per car. It does cost a little bit more to purchase the car, but throughout its life, I would like to think that you'll get that cash back.
And you talk about the mileage range increasing sort of as technology improves, and that's something that's been raised as a concern by some taxi drivers. What's your experience of that been like? How has the battery life lasted in the vehicles within your fleet?
The cars that we have are Skodas and they have a range of about 350 miles. So if a taxi driver could go out to work and he could drive 350 miles, I'd like to think that he'd take a break in that time so he could maybe put the car on to charge and then he's going to get another extension on top of that.
From your experience then, could you see all of the island's taxi fleet becoming electric vehicles, do you think that would be a viable option for the Isle of Man?
The answer to that is yes. I think in the future they will all be electric. I think the question is, how are we going to get them there? I don't think the government should be giving grants out to the taxi drivers in the world that we're in, and the cash spend off the government is quite high. I think if they could maybe work with us by installing chargers onto the taxi ranks, and this would allow people to charge up their cars while they were waiting for a job.
That is Liam Joyce. So both sides of the argument there. As I say, this has gone wild on social media today. If you'd like to add your comments, you can go to the Manx Radio Facebook page. Might be brought up on Man in Line as well. We did ask government for a comment on that survey, and they've told us that the survey was created to better understand the needs of taxi operators, especially to help inform its EV charging strategy. However, it goes on to say no financial support is currently available as an incentive, and there aren't any plans to introduce any either. So that is something that we will continue to keep an eye on in the coming weeks. 5:15 now.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, all being well, all looking okay for your drive home. Do keep an eye on the matrix signs, and also you can go and find the full list of roadworks that are happening around the island at manxradio.com. All looking good down at the airport, and with the steam packet, just having a quick look. The Manxman due into Douglas at around about 5:30, heading out again to Heysham at 7:15. As ever, if you spot anything that's keeping people held up anywhere and you're able to let us know, that'd be absolutely brilliant. 166 177 or studio@manxradio.com.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
You are listening to Update here on Manx Radio, 16 minutes past 5. Well, the Treasury Minister says a decision to pause the introduction of the Manx pension guarantee is not a U-turn, but instead a response to calls in the House of Keys for the public to be more informed. Dr. Alex Allinson joined us on breakfast this morning to talk about the plans to propose a 4.1% increase to both the basic retirement pension and Manx state pension in next week's budget, aligning with the UK's triple lock policy.
There was a lot talked about in Tynwald on Tuesday about fairness, about equality, about intergenerational fairness as well. And we need to take that on board, because this doesn't just affect pensioners. So it's getting that long-term sustainability. And I think that's what the Tynwald debate showed. That's what the will of the elected representatives, many of them who talked about feedback from their constituents. And that's what Treasury is listened to. In terms of the changes we're making, they amount to around about £1.4 million extra money coming out into pensions out of a total budget of £1.3 billion. And again, what we've needed to do since Tuesday, for instance, is rewrite the draft Pink Book. There are 10 changes in that, which we've notified all Tynwald members yesterday, 10 figures that have changed due to this, but the overall Pink Book remains exactly the same.
Do you think your fellow MHKs will be pleased at this announcement this morning?
Well, I'm reacting very much to their democratic debate on Tuesday, which was informed by them talking to their constituents over the last couple of months in terms of changes to the pension. There was some fear out there. There was some misunderstanding. We need to correct that. We need to make sure that when we do the right thing, and securing the future of the National Insurance Fund is the right thing, we do it in the right way and bring everyone along with us. So I'm hoping that the announcement today will please members, because what we're doing is absolutely responding to the debate that we had in Tynwald this week.
And there was plenty of media attention over in the UK when you announced this Manx pension guarantee plan. Do you expect this move this morning will similarly make headlines?
I'm not sure. And again, this isn't about making headlines across. This is about doing the right thing for our community, our people. It's doing the right thing for pensioners now and giving them that security, because some of them have been worried about this, and some of the statements made about scrapping the triple lock and how it would affect their pension. So reassuring them, but also being quite honest with people that we will need to make decisions. They'll be difficult for some people, but they have to be the right decisions for the future of our country.
That is the Treasury Minister, Dr. Alex Allinson, speaking on on Breakfast this morning. Much more about that again at manxradio.com if you want to listen back to the full interview. There's also the video on our Facebook page as well. Coming up to 5:20, a local expert says an urgent tree planting programme must begin to replace the predicted loss of most of the island's elm and ash stocks. Consultant arborist Ben Brooker says the island faces an environmental crisis in the years to come unless action is taken. He's been talking to Simon Richardson.
90+% of the two most abundant species on the island are going to be lost in the coming years. You know, this is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of trees. It's going to have a huge impact on our landscape, on our microclimate, devastating impacts to wildlife, and just generally make the island a less pleasant place to be, I think. So we really need to take steps to get some trees in the ground. Some ways we can do it: obviously support existing charities, the Woodland Trust, for example. Whether you go out planting with them, whether you chuck a few quid in, or simple stuff. Engage with their social media posts, liking and sharing it. It all helps. Another way, dare I say, we need to lean on government. The Isle of Man Climate Change Plan declared a real push for tree planting, but I'm not sure that push is happening in a meaningful way. We've got tons of land, tons of suitable land on the island which could be used for planting. Obviously, like we mentioned, people could plant their own trees, plant trees in their own property, right tree, right place. And lastly, besides planting, we need to focus on properly maintaining the trees that we have. Of course, the best time to plant a tree is yesterday.
That is Ben Brooker talking to Simon Richardson. Now, the boss of a cafe in Douglas says he's moving from his town centre location because it's a ghost town. Tim Brogan, who runs Gourmet Shakes, says a lack of footfall after 5 p.m. and increasing rates on the high street mean he's having to shoulder more costs. He's going to relocate to a new premises on Windsor Road after TT, and he's been talking to Chanel about why.
As most people know, we've tried to be community-based and keep our prices low. So through the last few years, we've done minimal price increases. And just tried to absorb the cost ourselves. That's one of the main reasons, reducing our costs so we can keep our prices low for families.
Does that mean if you have a standalone place, it's a bit cheaper for you as opposed to the high street?
It comes up a lot with businesses closing in town where rates are higher than out of town areas. The rate increase has obviously been a big blow for us again. Over 25% rise in 3 years has just been a bit hectic for us. We've built up a brand and hopefully a good reputation, so I think people will follow us. There'll obviously be more of an online presence, so you should be able to order deliveries online and potential for deliveries on a Friday and Saturday evening. Also, by moving to the new premises, we should be able to open till 8 p.m. or 10 p.m.
Have you found there's a need for those later hours?
Yeah, definitely. One unfortunate thing about the town centre is at 5 o'clock it sort of becomes a ghost town. So anytime we have tried to stay open a bit later, there just isn't the footfall after 5 p.m. I just find people are less likely to come into town now. I think constantly we're always looking to new things. We never really stay in the same area, so I think that's what's helped us. But it is very difficult.
Have you noticed that people are finding it a bit harder to indulge?
There's two sides to this, really. One side is I think that's what's kept us going, really. If people can't afford like a £100 pair of shoes, then they might come and make themselves a bit happy with a £4 milkshake. The other side is the cost of coming into town, and then obviously the temptation to go into other shops while you're here is a big one.
That is Tim Brogan, who runs Gourmet Shakes, explaining why he's relocating. Perhaps that'll be one of the subjects that's brought up on the budget programme, which is happening a week tomorrow. So that is the 21st of February from 5 p.m. We're out on location, an audience with the Treasury Minister, Dr. Alex Allinson. If you'd like to be part of the audience, there are limited seats available. You can find out how to apply for one of those seats at manxradio.com. If you'd like to watch a video about the budget, might be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, perhaps, just go along to our social media pages or our Manx Radio YouTube channel. Speaking of tongue-in-cheek, here's Rob.
Hello there. Well, taking a look at the sports side of things, we're going to start with cycling. Well, the 2025 global season is well underway now over the last couple of weeks, and Isle of Man pro rider Becky Storey has returned to competitive racing in Europe this afternoon. She's part of the Team Picnic Post-NL squad, taking on this week's Setmana Ciclista Valenciana in Spain, with the opening stage taking place today. Well, following a 112-kilometre route from Alzira to Gandia, Storey helped her teammate to a top 10 finish. Eleonora Chaboko crossed the line in 8th position to get some UCI points on the board. Well, the UCI event itself is running until Sunday, and separately, fellow Manx Elite competitor Lizzie Holden has not been included in the UAE Team ADQ squad for that meeting. Elsewhere, an Isle of Man resident has been appointed to take up a key role within the International Island Games Association. The organisation has confirmed Gary Whiteman will take up the post of General Secretary from the 1st of March this year. He'll succeed fellow Manx resident Andy Varnum, who'll remain with the IIGA and is being co-opted onto the IIGA's Executive Committee. Well, preparations are currently well underway within the association for the latest Island Games, which are taking place in Orkney this summer from the 12th to the 18th of July. In boxing, it looks like we're not far away from hearing when Manx pro fighter Matthew Rennie will be returning to the ring. In a short update on social media this week, he says his latest training camp is underway with fight news coming next week. Well, Magic Rennie last fought on the 4th of December 2024, in which he suffered his first professional defeat in a points loss to Sean Noakes for the English welterweight title at Wembley Arena in London. And finally, a rising talent in Isle of Man hockey has been called up to join one of the national development setups in the UK. Castletown player Archie Cox has been invited to be part of the Welsh national age group training squads for 2025. The Manx Hockey Association is describing it as a fantastic achievement and gives the player the chance to train with the very best the sport has to offer. Well, in previous years, Cox has represented the Isle of Man at under 14, under 16 and under 18 level, and also made his senior men's team debut during the latest county championships. And further afield, on the England talent pathway last year, he helped the England Red team to a 4th place finish at the 2024 UK Boys School Games, becoming only the second Manx player to have reached that level.
Don't we have some talented people over here? That's absolutely brilliant. You were a hockey player, weren't you?
I was indeed, yes,
Yeah.
up until a couple of years ago, and then commitments took me elsewhere.
Oh, well, you know, you could pick up your stick again. You never know. While you're going around in a sidecar, dressed as a pirate or something. I'm sure there's many things to talk about in this programme. Rob, thank you very much indeed. That is all from Update this evening. Coming up next on Manx Radio, it's the Archive Room with the wonderful Judith Lay, bringing us some clips from yesteryear which are well worth hearing again. Tonight, how to build an airport and something about a kipper. That's all I know so far. Then Michelle Kane is here with greatest hits from 6 p.m. Morris Powell brings you a little light music from 9 before Rianne winds you down from 10 with After Hours. Whatever you're doing this evening, have a good one. Christy will be here from 6 tomorrow morning with breakfast. Do join us then, and Update will be back at 5 tomorrow.